Hey guys, I think I'm live. I'm just double checking to make sure that everything is connected. And if you are tuning in not live, you can fast forward this beginning part. And if you are live, just hang tight until I know for sure that I'm on. Okay, awesome. It looks like I'm up and running. Good deal. Hello and welcome to my weekly live stream. I'm back again today and I'm feeling pretty good. We're all still healthy. I hope you guys are doing well. Whether you're social quarantining or social distancing or, on sheltering in place, wherever you are in the country and whatever level of changes that you're experiencing right now, I hope that you're doing well and that you and your family are healthy. Hope that you've also been able to use this really strange time to have some insights or find some silver linings in the changes that are happening right now. I know we have, in spite of the inconveniences and the challenges from all of this craziness lately. So that's really what I want to talk about today, actually, is how can we come together and take advantage of this strange time, because it is a crisis of sorts in the sense that everything that we know and the routines that we can count on are kind of up in the air right now, and there's a lot of uncertainty. And I want to talk about how we can come together in marriage to handle the stresses of the shutdowns and the isolation and the distancing, and just to get on the same team with everything that's going on. This is just, what I'm going to share is what I see from my point of view, what I'm observing, what the challenges are in marriages right now because of what's happening, and then some shifts in how we can think about it, ways to reframe this, and then some solutions, hopefully, to help you guys come together if you're having a hard time right now. Obviously, the problem and what's happening is that on the face of it, there's this health, pandemic, and some people are arguing, how contagious is it really? Are we overreacting? Is this really an illness shortage, or is it a healthcare shortage? Infrastructure versus illness, all the stuff that's going on politically, there's a lot of negativity and toxicity around it and fear. But regardless of how you look at it, it's shut off life as we know it. We're not functioning the way that we used to, and it's pretty unprecedented. Like, I never remember a time like this ever. I mean, we've had snow days, but this is crazy. So, some people are doing fine and they're not worried, and then some people are really, really scared. And regardless of what camp you're in, it's still stressful, because even if you're feeling pretty fine, you're still having to deal with the stresses of new schedules, kids at home, online learning. There's changes in everybody's lives, whether they're minor inconveniences or whether they're really serious health issues or economic problems like layoffs and things like that. So we've got kids at home, we've got the uncertainty. I don't know when the kids are going back. I have no idea if they're gonna be home for the rest of the school year, and what does that mean for working. I see a lot of couples arguing about how to handle it because they had different ideas of what they want to do, and there's not the built-in time frame to like figure stuff out and live the question. It's like we have to make decisions now, and people are kind of expected to recalibrate and adjust practically overnight. Not only logistically with schooling, like I mentioned, but also just emotionally. The emotions of our kids, the emotions of our family members who might be nervous Nellies, neighbors might have different ideas. It's just a lot. And I know my kids feel like it's torture to be home all the time, and that I'm not letting their friends come over and managing that because they have a very different idea of what we should be doing than I do. And so that requires a lot of emotional strength and management of ourselves. We have to manage ourselves in order to really support our family members too. The other big thing that comes up around this crisis is the lack of self-care. If everybody's at home, and especially families with young children, you're not going to be able to get out to a yoga class or go for the run or go to the gym or any of the things that you used to have in place to take care of yourself, to nourish yourself. People are losing sleep, and that's also a really big part of self-care as well. And then at the same time, with all of these stresses, whether it's logistical or economic or emotional, the problems that anybody had in a marriage are still there, and now there's even more pressure on them. And so those rifts are getting bigger with the pressure. I know I've quoted this before in this group. Terry Real always says that couples don't have problems, couples are problems. And so what he's really saying is that whatever problem you think you have, on the outside and, oh, this is making it worse, or this is why we're fighting, or this is why we don't see eye to eye. It's not the thing you think it is. It's really the dynamic between you. And once you have that sorted out, then you don't really have any problems anymore, because everything becomes a solvable problem when you have that emotional connection, when you have that trust and safety, when you have that sense of unity and teamwork. Then you can come together and figure stuff out even on the fly. Like the things that feel really hard suddenly don't feel so hard anymore, because you feel safe and you feel connected and you feel like you have someone in your corner, and you can move into love and not fear. And I think that there's a tendency to not see it that way. Honestly, I think the mainstream assumption is like, well, we'll just get through this and then we can focus on our relationships. Let's get through this crisis and let's muscle through this and back burner everything else. And they go into sort of survival mode and they think once this is over, then we can heal. Once this is over, then we can reconnect. We'll deal with it then. And it's just another opportunity, albeit a much larger one, to put things under the rug. And that's actually not how it works. But before we get into that and kind of, I'm going to share with you how I would want to reframe this, I want to share with you some of the things that I've noticed in my clients' lives, in my own life, and in my friends' lives in terms of how this health issue or this pandemic, globally is really affecting marriages. Number one, and I've seen this in this group and I've seen this in other groups too, one spouse, the most common thing I see is one spouse has a different idea of what kinds of precautions should be taken. We always talk about focusing on the things we can control. We can't control what other people do, but we can change what we do. But then what if we at home don't agree on what we're supposed to be doing? Like, for example, if one spouse thinks it's okay to go out into social places or work and then come home without taking clothes off and putting it right in the washer. And the spouse feels like, well, that is fine. I'm fine. I was just with so-and-so and we already know them and I've already been around them. So what difference does it make? And one spouse feels very strongly about that. That could become a power struggle, right? That could reveal whatever else is going on. If it's boundary issues, and how do you hold a boundary when you live in the same house? Right? How do you make somebody do something? You can't, but then you're sharing a space and it's complicated. It can also highlight poor communication. If there's not a strong emotional connection, you might not be saying what you really want to say. If your tendency is to avoid, then you're not really tackling these things head on. Whatever your issues are going to come to the light under these kinds of pressures. But that's the number one thing, is the difference of opinion around the level of precaution that we should be taking, and spouses accusing each other, one spouse accusing the other of being overly vigilant or, panicking for no reason, and you're overreacting is something that I've been hearing spouses say about their spouses. And then, the other one is saying, well, you're irresponsible. And so it just goes like that. The other thing too that I'm seeing is that the new routines with the school closings and the firings and the layoffs and things like that, and not being able to go to the gym or whatever the routines are being disrupted, there's stress around that. There's resentment. There might be like resentment if one spouse is at home with the kids and the homeschooling is falling on one spouse and the other spouse doesn't have to deal with it. Things like that will come up. Like, this is stressful, but I'm having to give up more than you're having to give up. Or just the stress, even if it doesn't turn into blaming, you move into fear, right? And when you're operating from fear, you can't be in a state of love at the same time. And there's a few things that happen with fear. You either tend to avoid, like the flee response, right? Fight or flight. If you flee and you tend to avoid, you're not going to talk about your fears. You're not going to talk about the solutions. You're not going to be able to bring things up or ask your spouse to take a precaution if you feel like that's going to turn into discomfort. It's like you have to face your discomforts head on in order to have these conversations. But this is really hard if that's not if your default mode is to flee when you're afraid. The other thing we do when we're in fear is we see our spouse as the enemy subconsciously. We may not be thinking like that's my enemy, but we're treating them and we're expecting them to not be on. And then we forget respect and we think through the lenses of the past and we forget the connection that was there earlier today or earlier this week. We gloss over the changes that have been positive that might have been made recently. And we just see things through that old lens of the old story of the relationship. If you've been doing work on the relationship and there's been improvements, when people go into fear, they forget that, right? And then they just kind of go back to those old ways because of survival mode. And then also what happens when we go into fear is we emanate stress energetically and non-verbally. So even if we're not snapping at someone or acting it out in our words, people can feel it energetically, and it communicates a lack of safety. It communicates angst, and people can pick up on it and absorb it, and people operate from that place without even realizing that they're doing it. They can pick up on it and feel it and then start. It's sort of like you set the tone, and people at this stage of the game, where we're all kind of just trying to rally and figure this out one day at a time, people are susceptible following someone else's tone when they set the tone. So we have to be really careful about that too. And I think it's damaging when we go into this faulty thinking of, this is just temporary. When this passes, I'll deal with my marriage then. I'll deal with my children then. I'll deal with the parenting things then. I'll deal with the most important thing later after this crisis passes. It's like, it's backwards. It's like trying to think about if you're building a house and you're trying to put the wallpaper on while the foundation is crumbling. It might make you feel better in the moment, but it's just a ticking time bomb before it all falls apart anyways. And so you really have to know what is the thing you have to be focusing on first. And we're going to talk about prioritizing and what that could look like in a second. But the danger is if you're not putting the right things first, the danger is that you're going to get to a point where the rift is, you get to a point where it's irretrievable, like reaching critical mass, where there's lots of stages where you could stop and turn around and salvage things or fix things or get things on better footing. But at a certain point, if damage keeps happening or the cracks keep getting bigger and bigger, eventually it's broken. And we have to remember that the crisis is not the thing to get through before we do the work in creating what we desire. The crisis is the opportunity. The crisis is the opportunity to create what we want. It's not the thing to get through first. And the reason why that's true is because who we are, what is real, becomes evident in times of crisis. When things are hard, that's when we find out who we really are. That's when we find out what our relationship is made of, is in times like that. And so if we aren't where we want to be, it's a call. It's a call to rise up. It's a call to become who we need to be to create what it is that we want to create. And if we can rise to the challenges, if we can take advantage of this crisis and this opportunity and the stresses and just say, all right, where are the silver linings? What could be really great about this? And where can I put my energies in places that I hadn't even thought of before? You can come out stronger, not just to weather it, but to come out stronger than you were before, and to be in a position where no matter what happens externally, no matter what layoffs happen, no matter what illnesses come in the family, you can handle anything because you're a team, you're connected, you're strong, and that's the most important thing. And if you have a great marriage, or if you've ever had a great relationship, you know that that's true. You know that there's nothing that you can't do when you're strong with your spouse, because you go through life with a completely different mindset. You operate from a place of strength and growth and expansion, and it allows you to adapt, and it allows you to recalibrate, and it allows you to be flexible because you're not contracting with fear. So this is such a great opportunity, and I had to get here myself too, because at first when all this happened, I was like, oh no, this is the worst timing, blah, blah, blah. And it's really easy to go there, and I've had to reframe this for myself. So I'm going to share with you some of the things that I've learned in this process. I've known this to be true, but I've really had to put it into practice in the last week for myself as well. Number one, what you want to do is you want to take this time to focus on what you really want. Not just, how do I get through the day with homeschooling? How do I find toilet paper, right? Like those things have to happen too. But you want to figure out, well, what am I really, how do I want to function? What do I want? What is my vision for my family right now? What do I want to be able to say I did during this time? What do I want my kids to remember during this time? What do I want the story to be about this time together? What are they going to say? Are they going to remember that you guys came together and it was a time of connection, and it was challenging, but you came together as a unit? It was actually a really fortifying time. And then that becomes your legacy as a family and as a human being for future generations. Or do you want them to remember just how horrible and stressful it was and they didn't even know, they were scared people were going to die and, all the stuff that a lot of the kids are feeling this from us. So focus on what you want. What is the story going to be about who you are in the situation and what your marriage is in the situation? And then once you can articulate that, what energy do you want to bring? How do you want to show up? So what's the opportunity for your marriage and family? What do I have to be a really sustaining part of that? And for that to feel natural, who do I have to be? So you don't want to wait for the relationship to be a certain way for you to show up as your best self. You have to be the person that you would be in your ideal marriage now, before you have your ideal marriage. And that's true of any radical change. That's true of any act of creation. You're creating something before it's true. You're creating something beyond the feedback of your immediate environment, and doing it before you're ready, essentially. So think big, take a minute amongst all your planning, the details and things like that, and through the survival, take a minute and think big, think about what your vision ultimately is. And then you want to embrace the light to shine upon what's coming up as a barrier, because when we start to think about what we want, we can feel bad, like, oh God, I'm so far from that. Here's what's going on. Here's what's wrong. This is what came up. Here's how I failed today. That's okay if that comes up as you're thinking about where you want to go. That's just helping you recognize, it's just shining the light on what needs to change, and that's positive. So don't hide from it, embrace it, and then focus on what you can control. And I love the exercise of taking a piece of paper and literally drawing a line down the sheet of paper. And on one side, it's the things you can control, and on the other, it's the things you can't control. And everything that's going on in your life that you're trying to deal with now goes on this piece of paper. And you just have to figure out what side of the piece of paper am I going to put it on. And it's just a really tangible black and white, like external prompting way to remind us, if we're starting to ruminate on the wrong things about what our neighbor is doing or whatever, then we can redirect our attention and go back to, what do I have control over right now? And remember, and this is really important, how we do one thing is how we do everything. How we do one thing is how we do everything. How we are in private is what translates to what we receive in public, or how things show up in our lives outside of our internal world. So that means what we're thinking about directly affects what we see in our environment, or what we perceive. Even if people can't see what we're thinking, it still affects it. So you really have to think about how you're doing every little thing. The means to get where we want to go can't be separate from the ends, right? The path is what becomes the destination. How you walk the path becomes the destination. I don't think that they can be separate. I think if we're letting ourselves behave today in a way that's not conducive of what we actually want in the future, then we're not going to get there as fast as we would as if we not to say that we're not going to slip sometimes, but it's not going to be as fast of a path as if we're really congruent with that. So if you get congruent with the energy, not just the vision of what you want, but how you bring that type of energy and that mindset and that identity of who you are and how you want to be in life to every little moment, how you bring it to the moments where you're failing, as well as how you bring it to the moments where you feel like you're being successful. The other thing you want to do is invert your thinking, and don't wait for the stressors to pass before you prioritize your marriage. I cannot tell you how many times I've talked to people where it's too late, and it's because they've been waiting for years and years and years, and they're saying things like, well, first we were raising the kids, and then my mother-in-law died, and then I got laid off, and then there was the global economic crisis of 2009, and then I was working all the time, and then there was graduate school, and there's always something. There's always something. And then people come to me and their spouse is already out the door, and sometimes they can turn it around and sometimes they can't. And it's heartbreaking when it really is a timing thing. Like, timing really matters. So if you are home now anyways, or if you have more time on your hands than you did before, I highly recommend taking that time to mentally invest into your relationship and start crafting your vision, start thinking about, what can I start to do differently to become the person I need to be to have the relationship I want to have. And just remember, like, what does prioritizing your marriage actually look like? We can say we're going to prioritize the relationship. We can say that we're working on our marriage. But what that actually looks like is putting your time and your energy into it mentally. It's on your it's within your bandwidth, and it's something that you're putting mental energy into every single day. If you're trying to get healthy in your body, you're going to be thinking about what you eat every day, not just once a week. You're going to be thinking about exercise and nutrition and things like that. You're going to be mindful about that every day if you actually expect to have results. You're not going to be surprised that you're not getting results if you're only doing something once a week. It has to be something that becomes, the fabric of your daily life. We don't expect to get physical health without conscious input. We don't expect to get a great career without getting certification or learning what we need to learn or doing the work of finding those opportunities and being ready to be offered those chances, to be ready to be given chances to step into something and to level up. And so we can't expect to have an up-leveled marriage if we're not willing to do the same kind of work as we would for anything else that we have as a goal in our life. And I just think more than any other area of our life, I think marriage is the area, or relationships, intimate relationships, is the area where we expect that relationship to nourish us so much without putting very much into it, more than any other area where we have a little bit more of a realistic expectation. Good intentions are not the same thing as doing the work, and good intentions are not the same thing as living the changes. Like, you might have really great insights about what you need to do differently, but that's not the same thing as actually living the new reality. And that discrepancy is where that's where the rubber meets the road. That's where the hard work comes in. So be a leader. That's my other piece of advice, is you want to, like I was saying earlier, that our fear sets the tone, and those around us, the fear sets the tone. If you tune into the news for too long, there's no way to not absorb it. Decide what you're going to let into your psyche, decide how you're going to protect yourself energetically, and be a leader to take a stand for your marriage and how you show up in every moment. Be a leader in showing up as the person you want to be, even if your spouse isn't where you think they should be yet. You know what I'm saying? Like, sometimes we think, well, I'm not going to be loving towards them because they haven't made it right yet. Taking a leadership role means being who you want to be no matter what somebody else is doing, and trusting that they will follow suit, that the energy of your intention and you're going to raise them up. Okay, you're just taking a leadership role. And that's hard because it's not already been made comfortable for you. When you step into leadership and you take a stand for your marriage, and you say, I'm going to start. Okay, I'm just going to go first. That's the person that's like breaking the ice. That's the person that's going out of their comfort zone, and it's more uncomfortable. You're making it easier, though, for people to step in with you. And there's nothing wrong with that. If you have the strength to do that, then I say do it, even if you think it's not fair, because if it's in alignment with your values, that's all that really matters. You're still being the person that you want to be, and so you don't have anything to lose. It's not like you're compromising yourself. As long as you're acting within your values, you don't have to worry about giving more, as long as you're honoring your boundaries in the same, at the same time. I think there's always a reason, and I noticed this in myself and my friends as well, there's always a reason to pull back or second guess if things don't materialize instantly. And it's hard to think about, how do we focus on what we can control without focusing on what we can't control, like in terms of the fear and worry, whether it has to do with this health crisis and all that means, or whether that has to do with our relationship. Like, for example, if you're on an airplane and they're giving you the safety instructions, and they're talking about the oxygen mask coming down and how to put a seatbelt on and how to get off the plane if you land in water and things like that. You're paying attention. Most people are paying attention, and they're relaxed. They're like, I'm going to pay attention. I'm going to find out where the exits are just in case I need to know. And I'm just going to focus on what I can control. And the rest of the time, you're not worried about crashing. Most people aren't, unless you have a fear of flying. But most people are not thinking about that. Same with seatbelts in cars. You put it on, you don't think about crashing the whole time you're driving. It's the same with this situation. Whatever is happening, if we can focus on this is what I can control. I'm going to take the precautions that I can. I'm not going to focus on what other people are doing. And then I have more freedom to enjoy the experience that I'm having. The journey that I'm on, wherever that takes me in terms of my relationships or in terms of my career, because for some people this is going to be career changes, or it's going to be a pivoting of sorts professionally. You can enjoy the ride when you know you've taken the precautions, but you're not spending all your time thinking about what you can't control. That also is the same for your marriage and being a leader in your marriage. What can you do? Take those precautions, meaning take the steps that you can take regardless of what they're doing. Like I said, as long as your integrity and your safety are not going to be compromised. And lead in love, right? Lead in love. Think about love as the antidote to everything. If the more love that you bring to something, the less fear can live there. They cannot coexist. So if you're like, well, I don't know how to get out of fear, I don't know how to stop being afraid, then just focus on love. How can I bring love to any situation? What would love do right now is a question I like to ask myself. What would love do? If love was here with me right now and love was a person or an entity, what would love say to me right now in how I could handle the situation? That can help you move out of fear too, whether it's in dealing with your spouse who doesn't want to wash his hands, or whether it's your career stuff, or whether it's homeschooling and worrying about what this is going to mean for your kids, or worried you're going to blow a gasket and lose your mind because now they're home all the time. If you work from home like me right now, which my kids are older, so it's not so bad, but I really feel for the people that have younger kids right now. And the last thing I want to say to you guys is that just to remember that you're not alone. This community is here for support. That's what this is here for, is to be able to lean on each other during these hard times. Please post in here if you have questions, things that you're going through. Sometimes just getting even a few comments makes you feel like someone's bearing witness to your experience, and they can join you and empathize with you, and maybe they could share of their own experience, and that's super helpful. You also can reach out and book a call with me if you feel like you need some deeper work on fixing the cracks in your marriage. If you're feeling the strain of this in your marriage right now, and you're ready to really do the work, then book a call with me at monikahoyt.com/talk. And what we'll do is we'll, dive into the dynamics and look at what needs to be done, create a plan for you specifically given your situation, and really get into the details of that. And then you can also post questions below on this live stream, and I'm actually going to see if anybody has done that now and see if I can answer any questions for anybody. And then I wanted to say, if you have anybody that you know of that could benefit from this video or any of the videos that I've had in here so far, feel free to add them to the group. You can actually add them on the right-hand side of the page or the feed that you're in when you come to my group. You can add them, and then they still have to be approved in by me, but if I see that you've added them, I'll let them in if it's somebody that was recommended by an existing member. But it looks like James was here. Hi, James. Teachers are receiving online training in various districts and states for the next phase. Yes, it's really interesting. I have one of my children is in a Waldorf school, which is like notoriously low tech, like they don't even do tech at all, and they have pulled it together. I'm so impressed. They've been working like 24/7 on trying to get their online distance learning program set up, and they've got it sorted. I was really impressed with them. And then my son hasn't even, well, he's been doing his independently, but it's pretty amazing how hard people are working right now. And that is another example of just having to like adjust on the fly and just take it as it comes. And even when people are finding it exciting, and even when people know and they're confident, and they're like, I can do this, this is fine, it's not that big of a deal, it's still an energetic drain. Anytime there's a learning curve, anytime you're going outside of your systems, like the systems that you use that keep things at status quo, it's an energetic output. And so then we have to try to resource ourselves differently. And that's something that I would strongly encourage you guys to be doing for the sake of your marriage, above all else, I think, because when our relationships are good, everything is good. Hey, Dan and Ann, I'm so glad you were on today. I hope you're still here. If you have any questions, I hope you guys are holding up really well. And I guess that's it. I don't have any questions. Just good to see you guys in here. Like I said, invite other people. And if you're watching this not live, if you're listening to this later, I still will go back through and answer any questions that you might have. And I'll post the link for a breakthrough call with me if you need some support during this time. All right, you guys, thanks for joining. And also, one last thing, if there's any topics that you really want to hear about, let me know. And I will do another training most likely before the end of the week, like probably on Friday. So just put a post in here. I'd really love to hear you do something on this topic, especially if there's like a specific question that you have. And I'm keeping a list of topic ideas, like a roster. So I want your input on these live streams. All right, that's it, you guys. I'll catch you next time, and I hope you have a really good rest of the day. Stay healthy.